Hey folks, so today's video is going to be about evaluating a unit and what makes a unit good and what makes a unit bad. Something that I think I've had quite a few new players ask me is how can veteran players just kind of immediately look at a war scroll and be like, that's not very good, or oh, that's too expensive, or oh my god, that's so competitively costed, or good lord, that's broken. And even if they're kind of knee-jerk hot take reactions, usually the gut instinct is close to correct because it's a kind of pattern recognition thing where they've seen similar units before that have been very overtuned, and there's going to be a few aspects of units that can really lead to them being very, very strong. So the first of those, I think kind of obviously, is numbers. One of the kind of very strange things about AoS is that you can actually work out how good units are based off of their attack profile. So if we look here are some units. This is the comparison we're going to be looking at today. Sorry, I've been playing Lumineth for all of 4th, so we're staying in-house because it's the faction that I know the best. One of the kind of weird things about this game compared to other games that I've played is you can kind of just work this out as an equation, or these profiles and so on, where you can say like, okay, a unit of 10 Riverblades, that's 31 attacks. For the sake of easy math, let's call that 20 hits. It's really 20.67, but 20 hits, 10 wounds at round 1, damage 1. You can do the same equation for Wardens. And because it's solvable to that kind of degree, it means that you can do things like this, where you end up just doing the maths for lots of different stuff in your faction. I would recommend quite strongly that you do this. This is a... There are apps that can do them as well. I think it's Stats Hammer, maybe? I'm not 100%, I don't use them myself. I prefer to do things myself because I feel like doing it yourself gives you a firmer handle of the damage that your units can achieve. And it means that you will be able to hold kind of how strong units are in your head compared to each other. So today we're going to be looking at Idralands versus Wardens. So numbers aren't everything, right? They're definitely not. But if we look at the example here of Idralands versus Wardens, you can see kind of immediately some stuff's obvious. These guys need to have conditional rend. They just have always on rend and a conditional rend too. These are 2 attacks, they're 3 attacks. These also have a gun. So the output of Riverblades is much, much higher. They have an extra move compared to here, but they have 1 less save. So okay, maybe Idraland Riverblades are less durable. These guys have 2 utility rules. These guys only have 1. And I think I would probably posit the argument that this 1 utility rule is worse than both of their rules. Like either one of the like if you could do this war scroll would be better, right? And if you could do this, then this war scroll would be much, much better. So both of these, or all of this, is kind of the first stuff that you should look at when you're comparing a unit. Purely on numbers though, you can say, okay, this unit is roughly what 3/4 is durable, give or take. With rend it's a bit more complicated, but let's say for the sake of argument it's 3/4 is durable as a unit of Wardens, but it moves faster and they're far more kind of aggressive, right? They're a lot more aggressively tuned. Like much more than a 25% increase in damage. So if we look back kind of here, you can compare the numbers and you can see I have this kind of weird little formula that I like to do, where I'll look at how much damage I'm getting per point for a unit. So you can see here that, Idraland's Riverblades are actually pretty comparable to Wardens, because Wardens' mortal wounds carry them a lot against a lot of save brackets. However, what makes it not even remotely close is if the Riverblades get to shoot. If the Riverblades shoot and then do damage, it's just over. And I think that including Power of Hish and such in these kind of conversations is a little bit unfair, because it's rare that Power of Hish is going to be best on Wardens. It does happen if you've got blobs of 20 in your army. But yeah, so this is the kind of thing that I want to think about when I'm evaluating my units. It's just be like, okay, how does the maths actually work out? One of the things to talk about with durability is if you're playing an army that's picking Shining Company every turn, these guys are definitely a lot more durable. It's a significant increase, over 25%. They're a lot more durable than Riverblades. Obviously, Riverblades are a bit of a weird one to compare to. I'm not going to sit here and tell you why Riverblades are better than Wardens. They just are. Riverblades are clearly very overtuned at the moment. But in terms of just kind of comparing the numbers, it's something to think about for sure. So it's not uncommon in Age of Sigmar for there to just be units that are better, like Riverblades are compared to Wardens. The internal balance of this game is not great, generally. Faction balance is usually okay, although at the moment obviously Nighthaunt are a disaster. But internal balance is often just terrible. So if you have like a favorite pet unit and stuff, don't be surprised if you do the maths for it and it's just worse than alternative options inside your faction. So the other thing I want to look at is niche. Niche is a strange one to talk about, and actually Lumineth are kind of a bad example, because Lumineth's thing is that they kind of have everything, right? That's sort of they're the masters of everything and bad at nothing. I think they're meant to be kind of like the jack of all trades, master of none, but actually they're just excellent at loads of things at the moment. So anyway, I've included a picture of the Terratic cohort here because I think that they are one of the best examples of a niche unit in the game. So that what is a niche unit? What do I mean by that? So basically, take an army like OBR. OBR are big, slow, stodgy, right? They struggle with getting around the board. They struggle doing things like take their lands and flanks, and the death one that's having 2 units in enemy territory in the early game. Generally, this means that they have to play quite aggressively in the early game. They need to take board space and so on, because otherwise they're just not going to be able to score tactics. If their opponent has no interest in interacting with them, you can make scoring tactics incredibly difficult. OBR can be forced to like charge stuff kind of headlong into the entire enemy army in the face of a double, because the only thing that they have available is Do Not Waver, or Seize the Center, or similar, right? So, Terratic Cohort. This is a unit that would be terrible in several factions, because literally all it does is Deep Strike. It's just like a kind of okay skirmishing unit. It's okay at fighting. It's medium speed. You know, it's fine. It's maybe a little bit more durable than its cost would suggest it should be, but it can Deep Strike, and in OBR that's huge. That becomes incredibly valuable. It's the same way that the Teleport used to be really, really valuable for Iron Jaws, because it's like the only kind of, I don't know, the stuff that enabled. And if anything, I think it probably is more valuable now, because that army is like a brick army, but having access to the Teleport lets you move kind of quickly. Similarly, I think Callus and Toll and Lumineth are, or at least in the kind of Hurricane Lumineth that I have been playing, they fulfill this thing where it's the only unit that I can take that really does the anchor job without requiring access to Shining Company or the Alarith facet. So that's a little bit more specific, but it is something to think about, where units can be worth paying an exceptional cost for if it's the only way that you have access to what they can do. So Callus and Toll, only way for me to get a durable anchor in my army that plans on using Power of Hish and Hurricane, move like the wind every turn. Terratic Court, only way to really get backfield access in the early game is OBR. I used to play a lot of Gutrot Spume in 3rd edition Nurgle, back in that kind of period where the game was really balanced before Gits came out, but after Flies had been nerfed. And the reason I like that model is because he did basically the same thing in Nurgle. He allowed you backfield access in the early game for your kind of speed 4 army, and wasn't screenable to the same extent that Nurglings were, where you only had to screen them in deployment. So I think that this is definitely something to think about. Most factions have like some kind of thing that will fill a niche for them. I would strongly think about it. Usually these are valuable because they allow you to score tactics. And tactics are kind of really, really important, especially in the early game, because if you don't have a good way to score tactics early, you can end up just giving away too much position. If you have to do Seize the Center against like 12 Varangard, and they're threatening the double, for example. So the last thing I want to talk about is breaking the rules. Breaking the rules is, I guess, really hard to define. But basically, there's some stuff in the game that happens in a certain way, and these are units that usually don't do that. So Riverblades are the example that I've picked for kind of today's episode, because Relentless as the driving current is insane. It kind of allows you to just control the combat phase in a way that I don't think is intended, and I think will likely get nerfed. But I would say that, you know, it's not always good. There are units that break the rules, and they've been absolutely incredible. In 3rd edition, Skavek's Plague Pack, stopping enemies from being able to contest objectives, was absurd. That was a crazy rule. That absolutely broke the rules of the game, and is really, really powerful. There are other examples that are similar to that. but sometimes you just have to be like, okay, well, this does break the rules, but actually it's just a little bit too expensive, or the numbers on the war scroll aren't good enough to justify it, etc., etc. I think the most common rule breaking thing that we have at the moment in the game is retreat and charge on cavalry. It's kind of turned into cavalry hammer. That's sort of where we're at. It feels a lot like the Galician infantry season that we had, where bounty hunter cavalry were just absolutely everywhere, except now, I don't know, there's no kind of real counter to them and also no real downside. So, yeah, I think this is the kind of trifecta when you're comparing a unit, right? So, before we go into the kind of end here, let's actually just compare this unit and that unit. So I would say, based off of what we talked about earlier, where these guys do less damage, but they are tankier, but it's conditionally tanky, right? You need to build around them. If you don't build around a Shining Company army, this unit is definitely not as good as Riverblades, because Riverblades just do more damage, are honestly similarly tanky. The difference between a 4-up save and a 5-up save on a unit that only has 10 wins is pretty minor. But the Riverblades bring so much utility, kind of so much aggressive power, that it's not really a competition, right? And you might, if you don't know, these units are the same cost. They're both 140 points, which is just, to me, a bit of a design failure. I don't think Wardens are completely terrible, irredeemable garbage, but I do think that they're one of the weaker units in the book, and they're kind of suffering from the fact that this used to be a unit that you had to take, so it almost didn't matter what their cost was. Now you have no obligation to bring Wardens at all, so they need to be very competitively costed, and they're competing with kind of better units in the army. So if we went back to, say, for example, my spreadsheet, you can see that Wardens don't really outperform them by any substantial metric in damage, and Idrolans bring a ton more utility. Wardens are, admittedly, quite a bit tankier. Where do I have Wardens here? So here we're getting 8.3 effective health per point, which is pretty good. Riverblades, I don't know if I've even calculated Riverblades. Oops. Maybe a lack of preparation, but also it's sort of knowing that Riverblades are so good that their effective health doesn't matter. It's not what makes them strong. I mean, you can work it out really, really quickly, right? Their effective health would be 10 divided by 1 over 3, which would be what, 15? 15 effective health over 40 points. So a lot less than Wardens with access to Shining Company. Like a lot less. So they're definitely squishy, obviously similar if you're not playing Shining Company, but I don't think you're ever playing Wardens without Shining Company. But that then brings the argument of, like, should the fact that Wardens effectively cost a facet be included in their cost? I'm not sure. That's for the game designers to decide. I think it probably should a little bit, but I think what is more realistic is these things should probably be 130, and these things should probably be north of 150. Anyway, that's a little bit of an insight into how I go about evaluating units. I think I would really, really strongly urge, if you take anything away from this, to do your own maths for your units. Just think about it and kind of get a rough idea in your head. It helps with so much stuff. It means that you'll be like, oh, well, I know now that this unit has roughly this much effective health, so you can work out, what your unit should survive, like roughly what their damage output is, because you're the one that had to do all the maths. It means you're not just looking at the final number and being like, okay, this unit is better than the other. You'll have a much better understanding of what you can expect your units to do when you're actually playing the game. So I will also kind of caveat that just comparing units like this, there are lists that I've built that have Wardens in it, even though I'm saying that Riverblades are de facto a better unit. So it's not the only thing that decides whether or not a unit should go on a list. Sometimes sticking to a theme or kind of doubling down on an idea that you have is just as important, and also with the new way that regiments work, sometimes it's the only option that you have. So this isn't the entire story, and I'm going to do a video on how you actually put units in your army and how you decide which units you should put in your army. That's coming. But hopefully this has been helpful. Thank you very much for watching.